What if every time you unsheathed your sword, someone had to die? In the amazing world of Norse legend, some weapons were forged in fire and destined for success. Think Mjolnir for Thor. But in this world, some weapons are not forged in fire. They're forged in regret, bathed in blood, and occasionally wrapped in bad decisions. These tools of war are forces for destruction that promise great power to their wielders. Unfortunately, this power normally came with a catch, often resulting in their wielders wanting a refund. Some of these weapons were so cursed that made even the most hardened Viking warriors reconsider their choices and maybe opt for throwing a rock instead of wielding their sword into battle. Today we're discussing such weapons, and I'm really excited to go through the Tyrfing Sagas with you. We're going to be jumping from a romantic Shakespearean-esque story all the way to the most dangerous and most cursed Viking weapons, and I really hope you enjoy, and thank you so much for clicking on my video. In Norse culture, curses were a big deal. Curses weren't just dramatic flair added to sagas and stories to give them that killer edge. They were real to the Vikings, and they were a real threat. They were serious business to them. They could twist your future, warp your fate, and doom you faster than being a Christian at a Viking barbecue. When weapons were cursed, it was basically the Viking equivalent of malware. Once installed, it was nearly impossible to deinstall, and it was guaranteed to ruin your day. This resulted in a lot of battle-hardened Vikings not being afraid of their enemies or being stabbed in the back or false gods, but being scared of if their own weapon would stab them in the back. Often they would have to make the dangerous gamble of unsheathing their sword, or maybe opt for a less dangerous approach like writing a very stern letter. Viking swords weren't mass-produced, unlike a lot of things today. They were actually quite prestigious items. Think of it as like the Rolexes of Ragnarok. They were often worth entire paddocks of livestock, which was a lot for Vikings. And they were passed down from generation to generation, often replacing their hilts for the fashion trends. Yes, a lot of Vikings were bloodthirsty butchers, but that does not mean they don't know how to accessorize and they don't appreciate fashion trends. Maybe they could have like a Viking-themed Met Gala one day. I'll give that to Anna Winter, she can have that one. The Viking-themed Met Gala, that'd be so cool. Well, I don't like the Met Gala to begin with, so at least if they had swords, I think it'd be cooler. You can't bring your phone inside, but you can bring your longsword. Crafting these weapons wasn't just metallurgy, it was a ritual. Master blacksmiths were revered almost like shamans. They performed rites during the foraging process, whispering runes over molten iron. Some smiths even mixed in ancestral bones during the foraging process. They believed this would bring the ancestral spirits into the weapons. They thought this could help them with in battle, having their ancestors looking over their shoulder, or helping them aim better or hit better. It's like self-defense with your ancestors, like you think your grandma's watching out for you. Is that berserker gonna get you? No, because grandma's watching. Consider them like the Apple engineers of their time, secretive, revered, and possibly putting unknown horrors into hardware. Forging a blade wasn't just about making it strong and making it withstand. It was about making it sacred and feared by others. The first story we're going into is the story of the brave Viking warrior Hogni and his beautiful daughter Hilda. This saga starts as a love story, but very quickly ends in Groundhog's Day. Long ago, in the ages of heroes, there lived a mighty king called Hogni. Hold on. There we go. Mighty king named Hogni. He was a lord of men whose blades shone with the light of war. And he had a beautiful daughter named Hilda, who was wise and fair. Her beauty was famous and it stirred the hearts of kings and fellow soldiers and Vikings and pretty much everyone she met. She was instantly loved by everyone. Then from distant lands came Hedin, who was the son of Handri. He was a proud, bold prince. The most important detail to get is that Hogni was away at war when Hilda and Hedin met, apparently at a party. It's kind of like the Leonardo DiCaprio Romeo and Juliet, sparks flew instantly, or it was a very romantic abduction. Honestly, the sagas just can't agree. Either way, Hilda was gone, Hogni is off at war, and Hedin has stolen her to be his bride. Whether or not she left willingly or was romantically kidnapped really depends on which bard you ask, but either way, her dad will not be happy. When he comes back and finds Hilda's gone, he was instantly enraged. So Hogni grabs his cursed blade, which is called Dáinsleif. This sword cannot be put away unless it tastes blood, and any wounds it makes can never heal. So like if you get a paper cut, you're just fucked. You could get it when you're 12 and you'll be 20 and still have it. Wielding Dáinsleif basically meant you're surrendering to bloodlust. Once drawn, violence was inevitable, as it impeded its own bloodlust on its wielder. So as soon as you pick up Dáinsleif, you feel the unrestrained urge to kill, I guess. Even the brave King Hogni itself was under Dáinsleif's rule when it came to bloodlust. His fury rose like a storm at the sea. With his sword in his hand and vengeance in his heart, he went to go get his daughter Hilda back. He went full dad mode and sailed to go confront Hedin. But Hedin too, probably knowing the amount of time before Hilda's dad figures out his daughter's missing and comes looking for her, has gathered his men and his soldiers and his weapons ready to fight Hogni when he arrives. Eventually, upon a desolate island, the two armies met. Hilda, ever the mediator, was pleading with both sides to cease, pleading for peace. She begged her father to forgive, and she implored Hedin to yield. But both sides were too proudful to listen. So Hogni draws Dáinsleif and said, "Thou hast made this offer over late. If thou would make peace, for now I have drawn Dáinsleif, which the dwarves made, and which must cause a man's death every time it is bared, nor ever fails in a stroke. Moreover, the wound heals not if one be scratched with it." And the bloodletting begins. The violent battle raged from dawn till dusk, steel ringing against steel, men crying out in valour and agony. The battlefield lay thick with the dead by the time the sun hit the sea. And when night fell, Hilda, who happened to also be a witch, just cause, invokes her magic. Using runes and Norse sorcery, she revived the fallen, compelling them to rise again. They were whole once more. But at dawn, the battle just began again, and at the centre of it all was a cursed blade called Dáinsleif that refused to rest, because one of its key rules is, once it's unsheathed, it must taste blood. Once bloodshed is drawn, the battle has begun, and therefore they repeat the cycle over again. Dáinsleif is a cursed sword that refuses to rest, and now neither do the warriors doomed for eternity. Because once Dáinsleif is unsheathed, it must taste blood, and once it tastes blood, the battle must continue, because Hogni is fueled by revenge and rage brought on by his daughter going missing and getting kidnapped or potentially just leaving, but also by the fact that Dáinsleif implores the man to be more aggressive. So as soon as he attacks Hilda, the war must begin, and so no matter how many times Hilda revives them, they must always go again and again and again. And so it went on. Each day they would fight, and each night Hilda would revive them all. Neither side would yield, neither side could win. This was not merely a conflict of arms, this was a battle forged on love, sorrow and revenge. A war sustained by a daughter's desperation, the father's unrelenting rage, and the blade's lust for blood. The battle never ended. To this day, it's said that on distant shores or misty isles, you can still hear the sound of steel clinging against steel as the battle wages on thousands of years later. Ghostly echoes of the battle, a battle that no death can end. This story is also very interesting for how it contrasts with Valhalla. So in Valhalla, they are also Vikings that are constantly fighting, constantly training, and constantly working, but they're training to fight Ragnarok. This story is different, because while these people are constantly fighting, constantly training, which is something that the Vikings look up to, this battle is stripped of all finality and all honour. It's a haunting reminder that some wars, once begun, can never be undone. Now in the world of Viking legend, few swords carry eerie reverence as Skofnung, the cursed sword once wielded by King Hrólfs, a warrior so mighty it was said he could rival the gods in courage. But Skofnung was more than just the king's blade. It was a weapon of ritual, honour and supernatural abilities. To know about the Skofnung is to know about King Hrólfs, so I'm just going to give you the basic summary of this king. He was the legendary king of Denmark, featuring very heavily in Norse sagas. He ruled with unmatched bravery and honour, often being compared to figures like King Arthur himself. He was beloved by the gods and feared by his enemies. And by his side he always carried Skofnung, his kingly sword to match his kingly self. According to legend, Skofnung was no ordinary weapon. It was said to shine with unnatural brilliance even in darkness. It was sharper than any mortal blade, able to cut through armour, through bone and through stone. Very sharp. And most chilling of all, it was haunted. It's not big enough to have the scary sword that cuts through armour and stone and bone, you also have to make sure it's haunted. Legend claims the sword had the souls of 12 berserker warriors, who were Hrólfs' elite guard, and when each one passed away, their soul would be infused into the blade, bringing with them their strength, their cunning, their ability to fight, as well as their rage. It cut deeper than any other blade, and the wounds it inflicted were not very easily healed. In fact, they wouldn't heal at all. One of Skofnung's curses is that once it cuts somebody, their wound will never heal, unless of course you had the magical stone that came with it, called Skofnung Stone. It's an artifact made for those who are unlucky enough to be on the receiving end of such a sword. But a sword this powerful isn't just easy to wield, it had very set rules that you must follow if you wanted to wield the sword. Do not draw the blade in the presence of a woman. No, this is not ever explained, and no, I don't know why. I tried asking a berserker for the answer, but they just screamed and ran off. So if you ever find out why you can't draw in the presence of a woman, please let me know. You can also never let sunlight touch the blade. This rule was taken very seriously. Wielders would often wrap it in cloaks and fabrics when they were trying to move it around. It's kind of like a vampire blade, you know? Break the rules and prepare for bad luck, injury, and spending the rest of eternity explaining your actions to some very, very angry sword ghosts. Not worth the price. Just keep it in the shadows away from women. Like I mentioned earlier, this sword was so powerful it came with its own healing stone, in case you regretted slicing someone, I guess. I like to think of this as like the Viking equivalent of calling tech support, like, hi, yes, I just finished my duel, I'm kinda regretting my actions. Yeah, I know he insulted my mum by calling her a fat yak, but I've had some time to deep breathe and think about my actions and maybe go to a bit of therapy, and I'd really appreciate if you could just take back the last few slashes. Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know if that's funny, we'll see if that stays in or not. But anywho, leaving the stone and back into the story of King Hrólfs, or I guess the end of King Hrólfs, he passes away. He passes away, and as custom in Viking era, Skofnung was buried with him in his burial mound. This was completely custom and not just because Skofnung was cursed. And it stayed there in the burial mound with Hrólfs for many years to come, until a very brave and bold warrior, maybe just a bit stupid, warrior named Zeki of Midriff. And he decides it's completely normal and okay to unbury the dead king and steal his sword from his corpse. Because borrowing a cursed royal blade is a completely normal thing to do. Not what I would do, but evidently Mr. Midriff, completely normal. So anywho, Skegri retrieves the sword and follows all the rules, follows the curse to the T, and somehow survives it all. He later passed it on to his kinsman named Eid. Eid doesn't really matter because he quickly hands it off to his friend named Thorkel. So it just keeps hopping along. And he hands over all the rules and the requirements, kind of like a Viking Airbnb host, telling them all the rules of the land. And then we start seeing the cracks of disaster. In the Laxdæla saga, Thorkel uses Skofnung in a formal duel. Thorkel won, which was great for him, woo! But the man he was fighting could not heal, thanks to the sword's magical curse. Thorkel then had to go back and borrow the stone from Eid, which I feel like Eid should have given the stone to Thorkel as soon as he borrowed the sword, because if you're going to use a sword, I imagine you're probably going to want to use the stone as well. But you know, everyone's friends are different. Maybe he did think that Thorkel would regret hurting the guy in the duel. In some books, this is where the story ends, with Thorkel learning the importance of the fine print. But in some sagas, it goes a little bit deeper and a little bit darker. It says that years under the command of unworthy hands, Skofnung's stone eventually stops working, and eventually whoever owned the sword perished. Some say the sword was returned to Hrólfs' burial mound when the curse got too cursy. Others believed it was buried in an unknown location, and are just waiting for a worthy hand to wield it again. I think Skofnung is going to have a very nasty surprise when it comes back to the, human world and realizes we now have like MK47s, and a metal sword of cursey magic is probably not going to be as useful as it once was. Now they've got through Dáinsleif and Skofnung, let's get into two more quirky tales, and then we'll end with the most dangerous and most cursed sword. The first of our two short stories is of the sword called Gram, which was the sword of Sigurd, dragon slayer and part-time tragic opera star. It was forged from the shards of his father's blade, because who doesn't want to carry their family trauma into battle? Long story drawn short, they'll probably do a whole video on that another day, but Sigurd uses Gram to slay the dragon Fufner, which is a great start. Perfect, exactly what they wanted, go slay the dragon, good job you. But then he steals the dragon's cursed treasure, which is not a good thing. Very bad, ends in disaster. After he takes the cursed treasure, everyone betrays everyone, tragedies everywhere, completely depressing story. And then Sigurd dies in a story so dramatic, Wagner made 4, not 3, not 2, not 1, but 4 operas about it. That's a whole lot of tragedy to make 4 operas. I know Gram is technically not cursed because of it, but I still feel like the weapon of Gram should come with a warning label saying, I don't know, warning, it may attract dragons, curses, and betrayal. Next on our list is a kinder sword called Laevateinn. It is either a sword, a wand, or a magic stick that Loki whipped up on a crazy whim. Because of course he did, he's the god of chaos, it's Loki. What do you expect? Sanity? It's only ever mentioned in one cryptic small little poem in one small little saga. But it's said to be the only thing that can take down Vufnir, which is a giant magical chicken that guards a giant magical gate to God knows where. Why a rooster? Why a magical stick? Why not? Laevateinn is the IKEA instruction manual of Norse weapons. Lots of parts, unclear purpose, and definitely constructed by a trickster god. Whatever it is, it's powerful, it's rare, and definitely on brand for the same mythology that gave us a giant serpent, talking wolves, and magical undead swords. Alright, let's finish with a bang, the most dangerous and most cursed sword of all Viking history. Or I guess instead of saying let's finish with a bang, I could say let's finish with a bloodbath, because that's exactly what the Tyrfing is. Tyrfing is the cursed sword to end all cursed swords. But to properly learn about the Tyrfing, we first need to properly understand a key part of Norse mythology, dwarves. Norse mythology paints dwarves as more than just skilled artisans. They were legendary creators, creating the most powerful weapons in all of Norse history, including Thor's hammer Mjolnir. Their excellent metallurgy skills earned them great fame in Norse mythology. The Tyrfing Saga begins with King Svarfalami, who was the grandson of Odin himself. Sadly though, he was a very greedy king. Svarfalami sought after a sword with unparalleled power that would rule over all other weapons in the entire Norse mythology. To achieve this goal, he captured master blacksmith dwarves Stavlin and Durin. He demanded the dwarves forge the most mighty blade ever created. The result was that the sword they made was beautiful. It had a golden hilt, it never dulled, and it was capable of slicing through iron and stone. But the king's coercion came at a price. It would kill someone every time it was drawn, like Dáinsleif. It would cause 3 great evils, and it would ultimately kill its own owner, which to me sounds like a terrible infomercial. With these 3 secret ominous conditions set, their revenge was swift and brutal. Moral of the story, never rush a dwarf. True to its curse, the first victim of the Tyrfing was the prideful king himself. The king was slain by a berserker named Algrim, who claimed the sword as his own, and then passed it down to all his descendants following. Each generation would inherit the blade, and each generation would fall victim to its dark power. One of the Tyrfing's most famous tales was that of Hervarar, who was a descendant of Algrim. She, against all warnings, decided to go to her father's haunted burial burrow and claim the sword as her own. I guess they put it in the burrow because they realized everyone who had the sword quickly died afterwards, and maybe thought maybe this sword's cursed and maybe we shouldn't keep giving it to our children. And then Hervarar was like, how about I still get it because it's a really cool sword. Has a golden hilt. I like the sword. Curse be damned. But anywho, she arrives at the haunted burrow and is quickly confronted by the ghost of her father. Her father is like, don't take the cursed sword, not worth it. She's like, I want the sword, it is worth it. And then she just boldly demands the sword, like, give it to me. Which is very bold, however, I gotta give you that. Ill-advised, but still very bold. Her courage did earn her the sword, but also did mark her life with tragedy. Which you would expect with a cursed sword. And with this, the Tyrfling's curse continued to haunt that family for generations. The Tyrfling's legacy finally culminated in a devastating battle between the Goths and the Huns. A massive force of 343,200 Huns, mounted on horses, came to attack the Goths. The sword was wielded in this battle by Heiðreks, which was one of the descendants of Hervarar. In this battle, the sword played a pretty central role in all the carnage. And this saga paints a pretty devastating and scary tale of how this battle ends. I'm talking rivers choked with the bodies of warriors and horses, water turning red with blood. It was truly a fitting battle to be a fitting end for the Tyrfling's legacy. This was a sword born in vengeance and steeped in blood. This was a very bloody battle, worthy of such a cursed sword. But as always, the victory meant nothing. Heiðreks too died with the sword in his hand, just like every wielder before him. It's kind of like a Viking version of Final Destination, but with more beards. You know? Ultimately, the Tyrfling's destructive journey really embodies the Norse mythology's belief on fatalism. A weapon born of vengeance, leaving ruin in its wake. In the end, Tyrfling didn't just embody power like the greedy king wanted. It embodied inescapable fate. Swords like Tyrfing and Dáinsleif weren't just legends. Real swords had been found in burial mounds, maybe just trapped by a very nervous Viking that didn't want ghosts following them everywhere they went, which I think is very fair enough. Some museum pieces even reported a glow, according to some people on Reddit who worked at museums in Iceland. I don't know about you guys, but if a sword ever whispered to me, I am out. I don't care if it's Excalibur the sword. I am getting a longbow and a therapist and I am out.
No thanks, I choose life.
I don't care if I'm a coward. If you are interested in any of the sagas that I talk about today, feel free to look down my description as I'll list them all out for you so you can go check out and do your own research. I think a cool part about cursed swords is that some of them may still be out there. I don't personally believe in curses, but just the idea that maybe cursed swords still out there laying dormant waiting for a worthy hand or someone just to find them, I think that's a really cool idea. But please let me know if you would ever wield a cursed sword yourself, or are you comfortable in the longbow category like me? I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for watching and I really hope you enjoyed and have a good rest of your day. Bye!